People think a dance floor tells the whole story about a woman, that if you move under certain lights, you must belong to the night forever. I learned early how to let those assumptions pass through me without sticking. The music, the heat, the eyes. None of that was new. That night wasn't supposed to be either. It was just another shift, another crowd, another version of myself I knew how to wear. Then she sat down. She didn't blend in. She didn't try to impress. She watched. Calm. Precise. Like someone used to observing outcomes before making decisions. When she spoke, she leaned in slightly. Not to be heard, but to make sure I was listening. "I'll pay you a month's salary if you stay with me," she said. No rush. No smile asking permission. Just certainty. I held her gaze. Not because I felt small, but because I didn't. There's a difference. I'd heard offers before. Better ones even. But something about the way she said it told me this wasn't about desire. It was about expectation. About being accustomed to yes. The music kept going. The lights didn't change. No one around us noticed anything shift. But something did. Right there. Between her confidence and my silence. I could feel the moment stretching, waiting for an answer that would either confirm everything she believed, or quietly undo it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. And when I finally spoke, the world didn't stop, but something in her did. If this kind of story speaks to you, subscribe to the channel for more emotionally real narratives, and tell us in the comments, what city and country are you watching from? My name is Grace, and the version of me most people think they know only exists under colored lights. On the club floor, I move to a rhythm that isn't mine, it's borrowed. From the bass, from the expectations in the room, from the unspoken rules that say a woman who dances like this must be available in every other way too. I learned early how to separate myself from that assumption, how to let it slide past my skin without sticking. Dancing is my job, not my confession. Still, some nights blur the line more than others. That night started like any other. Same playlist. Same red glow bleeding into purple. Same crowd pretending not to watch while watching too closely. I noticed Emma the moment she sat down. Not because she demanded attention, but because she didn't. She observed. Calm. Still. Like someone used to being the one who decides when things begin and end. She didn't dress like the room. She dressed like power that didn't need permission. She didn't interrupt my set. She waited. When I stepped off the stage, towel around my neck, breath still uneven, she spoke my way without raising her voice. "I'll pay you a month's salary if you stay with me." No smile, no slur, no hesitation, just certainty. I looked at her then, really looked, at the confidence settled in her posture, at the way she held her glass like an accessory she could afford to forget. She wasn't offering desire, she was offering leverage, and she expected the answer she was used to hearing. I didn't give it to her. I let the silence stretch, long enough for her to notice, long enough for the music to fill the gap she had assumed would belong to agreement. In that space, I saw something flicker across her face. Confusion, maybe, or disbelief. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was unfamiliarity. "I don't work like that," I said finally. My voice was calm, steady, honest. That was all. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I didn't soften it. I stepped back, picked up my things, and walked away before she could recover enough to reframe the moment into something she could control. I could feel her eyes on me as I disappeared into the hallway, but not the way men usually look. This was different, as if something she relied on had failed without warning. Outside, the night air cut through the heat clinging to my skin. The city was loud in a different way. Sirens, traffic, voices overlapping without rhythm. I welcomed it. Noise I hadn't been choreographed to answer. I told myself the moment was over. Another interaction filed away. Another assumption broken. But I thought about her more than I meant to. Not about what she offered, but about how sure she had been that it would work. By morning, I was someone else again. Hair pulled back. Minimal makeup. Neutral clothes. Grace, the operations assistant on the third floor of a corporate building that smelled like polished stone and restraint. No music, no spotlight, just emails, deadlines, quiet competence. I liked that version of myself too. She was steady, invisible when she needed to be. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Emma owned the building I walked into every morning, and she had no idea that the woman she tried to buy the night before was already part of her world. By the time Monday arrived, the club already felt like something that had happened to another woman. Morning light has a way of flattening things, turning intensity into memory, desire into something manageable. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, tying my hair back, watching my reflection settle into its daytime version. Grace. Neutral. Contained. The woman who answered emails, not stares. I chose clothes that blended in on purpose. Soft colors. Clean lines. Nothing that lingered. The subway was crowded as always. Bodies pressed together without acknowledgement, everyone wrapped in their own private urgency. I liked the anonymity of it. No one here expected anything from me beyond taking up space correctly. I held onto a pole and let the city rock me forward, unaware that 2 floors above where I worked, a woman named Emma was probably reviewing reports I had touched without ever noticing my name. The building greeted me with its usual chill. Marble floors, glass walls, quiet authority. I badged in, nodded at security, and headed toward the elevators with my coffee warming my palm. The 3rd floor buzzed gently, keyboards clicking, phones murmuring, the sound of people doing work that mattered without being seen. I sat at my desk, logged in, and let the familiar rhythm pull me in. An hour passed before something shifted. An email came through marked high priority. I frowned at the subject line and opened the attachment. Vendor numbers, forecast summaries, nothing dramatic at first glance. But patterns speak if you know how to listen. I leaned closer, scanning line by line, and felt that quiet internal click. The one that tells me something is off. Small discrepancies, repeated. Intentional or careless, I couldn't tell yet. I spent the next 40 minutes cross-checking, annotating, building a clean explanation. I didn't rush. Precision matters more than speed. When I was done, I forwarded the file to my manager with a brief note and went back to work. I didn't think about Emma. I didn't think about the club. I thought about numbers. At least I told myself I did. Around mid-morning, my manager, Denise, appeared beside my desk. She didn't sit. That alone was a signal. "They want you upstairs," she said quietly. I looked up. "Who's they?" She hesitated, then exhaled. "Executive." My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with awareness. I stood, smoothed my blouse, and followed her toward the elevators. As the doors closed and the car began to rise, the memory of a low voice and an impossible offer brushed against my thoughts. I dismissed it. Coincidences only feel meaningful when you're already looking for them. The executive floor was different in ways that were hard to name. The air felt filtered, the noise deliberate. People moved with purpose, as if every step had been approved in advance. We were led into a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. Midtown stretched out below, sharp and confident, pretending permanence. I took a seat near the end of the table. When Emma walked in, the room adjusted. She didn't command attention with volume or movement. She simply arrived, and everything else recalibrated around her. Tailored blazer, controlled posture, the kind of presence built over years of being listened to. She scanned the room quickly, efficiently, and then her eyes passed over me without stopping. I shouldn't have cared, but I noticed. The meeting moved fast. Questions, numbers, decisions. When the discrepancies came up, Denise gestured toward me. "Grace found the issue," she said. Emma turned then. Her gaze landed on me. Not recognition, not confusion, just evaluation. She waited. I explained. Calm, clear. No apology in my tone. No unnecessary confidence either. Just truth laid out cleanly. As I spoke, I felt her attention sharpen, like a lens adjusting focus. She asked one question. I answered it. She nodded once. "Good work," Emma said. "Fix it today." That was it. The meeting ended almost immediately after. As people stood and gathered their things, Emma rose and moved toward the door. She passed close enough that I caught a trace of her perfume, subtle, restrained. Not the kind that belonged under red lights. At the doorway, she paused and glanced back. "Grace," she said, tasting my name like it was new. "Come by my office later." I nodded. "Okay." She left. And only then did I let myself breathe, because something settled into place with a quiet certainty that made my chest feel tight. Emma hadn't recognized me, not yet. But she had just invited me into a space where neither of us could pretend the night didn't exist. Emma's office was quieter than I expected. Not empty. Quiet in the way spaces owned by powerful people tend to be. The kind of quiet that absorbs sound instead of echoing it back. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a deliberate statement, not a view. Everything in the room felt intentional. The placement of the desk, the muted colors, the absence of anything personal enough to be used against her. Control lived here. "Have a seat," Emma said, gesturing toward the chair across from her desk. I sat, folding my hands loosely in my lap. I didn't cross my legs. I didn't shrink. I didn't perform. I had learned long ago that presence doesn't need decoration. Emma noticed that. I could feel it in the way her gaze lingered, not on my body, but on my posture, on how comfortably I occupied the space she ruled. She reviewed a document on her tablet while I waited. The silence stretched, measured but not hostile. It wasn't a test meant to intimidate. It was a habit. Emma was used to people filling quiet with unnecessary words. "You've been with the company how long?" she asked, still looking down. "Almost 2 years," I replied. "And before that?" "Similar work. Different places." She finally looked up. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, but not unkind. "You don't talk like someone who's trying to impress." I met her gaze. I wasn't aware I needed to. The corner of her mouth twitched, not a smile, something closer to appreciation. "Fair," she said. "That's rare." She leaned back slightly, folding her hands together. The shift changed the energy in the room. Not less powerful, but more conversational. "Your analysis saved us a very uncomfortable meeting," Emma continued. "Most people would have flagged the issue without understanding the pattern." "I like patterns," I said. "They tell the truth when people don't." That got her attention. She studied me again, slower this time. I wondered, briefly, if something in my voice had stirred a memory. If some part of her recognized the cadence, the steadiness, but if she did, she didn't show it. "I'm putting together a short-term task group," Emma said. "Cross-departmental. I want you on it." My chest tightened. Opportunity rarely arrives without strings. "Will this affect my current workload?" "Yes," she said plainly. "You'll have more of it." I nodded once. "Okay." No hesitation. No gratitude speech. I saw her register that too. "Most people ask what's in it for them," Emma said. "And?" I asked. "And you didn't." "I assumed you wouldn't offer it if it wasn't worth your time," I said. "Or mine." This time she smiled. Brief. Genuine. It changed her face more than I expected. "Grace," Emma said carefully, as if anchoring herself to my name again. "What do you actually want?" The question wasn't professional. Not really. I held the silence for a moment, not to provoke, but to answer honestly. "To do my work well," I said, "and to not be underestimated while I do it." Something shifted in her expression then. Recognition, not of the club, but of something internal. A familiar struggle, maybe, or an old version of herself she hadn't thought about in years. "I can work with that," Emma said quietly. The meeting ended soon after. No handshake, no dramatic closing line, just a clear agreement and an unspoken tension that followed me as I stood to leave. At the door, Emma spoke again. "Grace." I turned. "There are expectations that come with proximity to this floor," she said. "People will watch you more closely." "I'm aware," I replied. She nodded, satisfied. "Good. Then we understand each other." As I stepped back into the hallway, the office door closing softly behind me, I felt something settle in my chest. Not fear, not excitement. Awareness. Emma still didn't recognize me as the woman from the club, but she was drawn to something she couldn't yet categorize. And I knew from experience that curiosity, left unattended, becomes something far more dangerous, especially for someone used to being in control. Working with Emma changed the way the days moved. Suddenly, time had edges. Deadlines felt sharper, conversations more deliberate. I was pulled into meetings I'd never been invited to before, looped into decisions that usually happened far above my pay grade. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it. The subtle recalibration of how I was seen, less invisible, more observed. Emma never treated me like a favor. She was demanding, precise, intolerant of excuses, but she listened, really listened. When I spoke, she didn't interrupt or redirect the conversation back to herself. She weighed my words, tested them, sometimes challenged them. It was exhausting in the way real engagement always is, and unsettling, because it felt equal. We spent hours in glass rooms overlooking the city, markers squeaking against whiteboards, numbers turning into strategies. Sometimes our shoulders brushed when we leaned over the same document. Sometimes our eyes met across the table and held for a beat too long. Nothing explicit, nothing inappropriate, just a current humming beneath the surface, quiet but persistent. I told myself it was projection. Emma was brilliant, controlled, accustomed to being admired. It was easy to mistake proximity for intimacy. I'd made that mistake before, with people who confused attention for connection. I refused to let that happen again, especially here, where power complicated everything. But there were moments. Once, late in the afternoon, rain streaked the windows and the city darkened faster than expected. The office lights clicked on automatically, soft and even. Emma stood beside me reviewing a report, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You always see what others miss," she said, not looking up. "I notice what's quiet," I replied. "That's usually where the problem is." She smiled faintly. "That's an expensive skill." "I know," I said before I could stop myself. She laughed then, actually laughed. The sound startled both of us. It loosened something in the room, something that had been held too tightly. Another time, during a meeting with senior staff, someone spoke over me. It was casual, almost reflexive. Emma's response was immediate. "Let Grace finish," she said, voice calm but unmistakable. The room adjusted. So did I. I didn't thank her afterward. I didn't need to. She hadn't defended me as a gesture. She had done it because she expected competence to be respected. The difference mattered. Still, the nights remained separate. I kept dancing, kept the music loud and my name private. I didn't look for Emma in the crowd. I didn't want to know what it would do to me if I saw her there again, this time knowing who she was by day, knowing the weight her gaze carried in rooms like the ones I now sat in. But the city has a way of folding lives back onto each other. One evening, after a long day that bled into early night, I left the building later than usual. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glossy and reflective. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Are you still nearby? Emma." My breath caught. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. I could imagine her standing upstairs, jacket still on, office lights dimmed, city humming below. I could imagine the reasons she might be asking, and the ones she wasn't admitting to herself. "Yes," I typed back. "I just stepped outside." There was a pause. Then, "Can we talk?" "Not here." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, because I did. "Okay," I replied. "Where?" A location pin appeared. A cafe 2 blocks away, neutral ground, public, safe. When I arrived, Emma was already there, seated near the window, coat draped over the chair beside her. She looked different outside the office. Softer. Less armored. The city reflected in the glass behind her like a second, quieter version of herself. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "For work?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "No." The word landed between us, heavier than it should have been. She studied me for a moment, as if assembling something internally. "There's something about you," Emma said carefully, "and I don't like not understanding it." I met her gaze. Steady. Honest. "Then maybe," I said, "you should stop trying to." Silence stretched again, familiar now. Charged but not hostile, and in that quiet cafe with rain cooling the pavement outside and the city pressing in from all sides, I felt the first real shift. Not recognition. Not yet. But the beginning of something neither of us would be able to keep contained much longer. The cafe smelled like roasted beans and rain-soaked coats. It was the kind of place people chose when they wanted to talk without being overheard. Soft lighting, low music, tables just far enough apart to grant privacy without isolation. Emma wrapped her hands around her cup. Not drinking, just grounding herself. I watched the small movements she probably didn't notice. The way her thumb traced the rim, the way her shoulders stayed tense even while she tried to relax. "I don't usually do this," she said. "Meet employees outside the office?" I asked lightly. Her lips pressed together. Meet people without an agenda. That honesty surprised me. It shouldn't have, but it did. Emma was used to precision, to intention. This, whatever it was, didn't fit neatly into her systems. "You don't have to explain," I said. "I came because I wanted to." She looked at me then. Really looked. Not evaluating. Not managing. Seeing. "That's what unsettles me," Emma admitted. "You don't want anything from me." "I want clarity," I replied. "And respect." She nodded slowly, as if filing that away. "I can offer both." We talked for over an hour, not about work, not about titles, about the city, about exhaustion, about the strange loneliness of being competent in a world that only rewards performance. Emma told me she hadn't planned to be a CEO. It had happened gradually, a series of decisions that narrowed her life until power replaced proximity. I told her about juggling schedules, about choosing practicality over comfort, about the discipline it takes to stay kind when people mistake access for entitlement. There was no touching, no flirting that crossed a line, just a closeness that grew without permission. When we stood to leave, the night had deepened. The streetlights reflected off wet pavement, turning the city into something cinematic and unreal. Emma hesitated at the door. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." She inhaled. "Do you dance?" The question landed harder than it should have. I held her gaze, searching her face for recognition. Any flicker of memory from the club. There was none, just curiosity. Genuine, uninformed. "Yes," I said. Her eyes softened, interest sharpening at the edges. "Where?" I considered lying. It would have been easier, cleaner. But something in me resisted. This story, if it was going to exist at all, couldn't be built on a mission. "A club downtown," I said. "Mostly weekends." Silence followed. Not judgmental. Processing. "I'd like to see you," Emma said finally. "Dance, I mean. If that's okay." I didn't answer immediately. I thought about the red lights, the bass. The version of her who had sat at a small table and tried to buy my time without knowing my name. I thought about the version of me she knew now. Composed, articulate, steady. "Maybe," I said, "but not like that." She frowned slightly. "Like what?" "Like I owe you something," I said. "I don't." Understanding dawned slowly. It changed her posture, softened her voice. "You're right," Emma said. "You don't." We walked outside together. The night air was cooler now, the rain fully gone. At the corner, she stopped. "I'm glad I asked you to come," she said. "So am I replied. As we parted, I felt it, the line thinning. The space between who she thought I was and who I actually was narrowing, ready to snap into recognition. She would see me under those lights again, and when she did, there would be no room left for misunderstanding. I invited Emma to the club 2 days later. Not impulsively. Not as a test, as a decision. We were finishing a late meeting when I said it casually, as if it didn't carry weight. "If you still want to see me dance," I told her, gathering my things, "you can come Friday night." She looked up, surprised, but careful. "Only if that's okay with you." "It is," I said. Then I added, because it mattered, "But you come as a guest. You don't sit close, you don't speak to me, and you don't stay after." Emma didn't hesitate. "I understand." Friday night arrived with rain-softened air and streets glowing under neon reflections. The club was full, alive in that familiar way. Music heavy, bodies moving, desire floating without direction. I changed backstage, slipping into the version of myself that didn't apologize for being seen. The lights warmed, the bass rose, and when I stepped onto the stage, I already knew where Emma was sitting, near the back, alone. She didn't look like she did in the office. No armor, no authority radiating outward. Just attention. Real, focused attention. I danced without altering myself for her. No invitation, no performance of intimacy, just precision, rhythm, control. I didn't look at her once, but halfway through the set, I felt it. That shift. Emma's posture stiffened, not with desire, but with realization. Recognition doesn't announce itself. It settles. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened as something clicked into place. The way I held still between movements. The steadiness. The same presence she'd felt across a conference table. When my set ended, I left the stage immediately. Backstage, I barely had time to towel off before the manager knocked. "She's asking for you," she said. "By your real name." I stepped into the hallway where the music dulled into vibration. Emma stood there alone, hands clasped in front of her, looking shaken in a way power couldn't smooth over. "Grace," she said quietly. "Yes." "I know now," Emma continued. "I should have known earlier, but I didn't want to see it." She exhaled, steadying herself. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you never asked who I was at night," I replied calmly. "And because I needed to know who you were when you thought I was just there." That landed. Hard. Emma nodded slowly. "You're right." She looked up at me then, not as a CEO, not as a woman who negotiates everything, just as someone owning a mistake. "I owe you an apology," she said. "What I said that night, offering money like it could replace consent or connection, was wrong. Arrogant. I'm sorry. No excuses. No justification. Just truth." "I wasn't offended," I said, "but I was clear, and I heard you," Emma replied. "Too late, but I heard you." Silence filled the hallway, not awkward, not charged, honest. "I don't want to be the woman who tried to buy you," she added. "I want to be someone you choose, if that ever happens." I met her eyes. "Then you don't rush this." "I won't," she said immediately. She stepped back, giving me space without being asked. That mattered more than any promise. As she walked away, I felt the balance settle. Not in my favor, not in hers, but finally, evenly. And for the first time since the night she spoke that sentence she thought would work, Emma wasn't trying to control the outcome. She was waiting. We didn't plan the night. That was the lie we both told ourselves. Emma suggested dinner after work, neutral enough to feel safe. A small restaurant downtown, dim lighting, tables close enough to hear other people breathing. We talked like two women who had been circling the same truth for weeks without touching it. About work, about the city, about exhaustion. But beneath every word, something pressed forward, unspoken, undeniable. She looked different outside the office, less guarded. Her shoulders relaxed as the wine warmed her voice, though she never lost that sharp clarity that made her Emma. I noticed the way she watched my mouth when I spoke, the way her hand lingered on the table between us, open, not reaching, waiting. When we left, the night wrapped around us softly, no rush, no destination decided out loud. We walked. The city felt close, intimate, like it was holding its breath with us. At the corner, I stopped. "This is the part where we pretend nothing is happening," I said quietly. Emma smiled, not confident, not teasing, honest. "I'm tired of pretending." So was I. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't clumsy either. It was deliberate. Her hand warm at my waist, mine steady against her jaw. When our mouths met, it felt less like ignition and more like permission finally granted. Weeks of restraint collapsed into something slow, deep, consuming. We didn't speak after that. Her apartment was close, too close to ignore. Inside, the city lights spilled through the windows, painting her living room in gold and shadow. We stood there for a moment, breathing each other in, as if making sure this was real. Emma touched my face like she was unlearning something, Control, maybe. I kissed her again, harder this time, and felt her respond without hesitation. Jackets fell somewhere behind us. Shoes followed. The world narrowed to heat, breath, skin. When we finally reached the bedroom, it wasn't about urgency. It was about inevitability. I remember the way she whispered my name, not as a question, not as a claim, just gratitude. I remember answering her with my hands, my mouth, the quiet certainty that neither of us was bargaining anymore. The rest of the night blurred into warmth and closeness, and the kind of intimacy that doesn't need choreography. No power. No roles. Just two women choosing each other, again and again, until sleep claimed us. I woke just before dawn, the city still quiet. Emma was asleep beside me, unguarded, her hand resting on my arm like it belonged there. For the first time since I'd met her, she wasn't reaching for control or withholding it. She was simply there, and I knew, with a clarity that startled me, that crossing this line had changed everything. Not because we had slept together, but because neither of us could pretend anymore. We learned how to disappear in plain sight. It started quietly, texts sent late, locations shared instead of explanations, apartments borrowed from friends who asked no questions, hotels where no one knew our names. We didn't call it hiding. We called it being careful, but the truth lived somewhere less comfortable. We were choosing shadows because the light asked for things we weren't ready to give. At the office, we became experts at restraint. Emma addressed me like any other employee. Measured, professional, distant. Sometimes too distant. Sometimes her voice hardened just a fraction when she spoke to me in meetings, as if overcorrecting for something only we could feel. I learned to read her moods in the smallest details. How long her emails were, whether she used my name, whether she looked up when I entered a room. We never touched there, but our eyes did. In hallways, across conference tables, in the quiet seconds before meetings began. Desire doesn't need contact to exist. Sometimes denial sharpens it. Sometimes it makes it unbearable. At night, it was different. Emma would open the door and drop the day like a coat she'd been wearing too long. Her control softened the moment it was just us. She kissed me like she'd been holding her breath for hours, hands steady but urgent, as if reminding herself this was real. I liked that version of her, the one who didn't negotiate affection, who didn't measure outcomes. We didn't talk about the future, we talked about us, about how strange it felt to want something this much without strategy, about how the office made us careful and the city made us reckless, about how desire can grow teeth when it's fed in secret. Some nights we laughed about it, pretending this was temporary. Other nights, silence pressed between us, heavy with questions neither of us wanted to ask yet. I could feel the cost building. It showed up in small ways, in how I checked the hallway before leaving her apartment, in how Emma never stayed over at mine, afraid of being seen, in the way I sometimes felt like I existed in compartments, lover at night, employee by day, never both at once. One evening, after we'd been lying together for a while, Emma traced idle patterns on my arm. "I hate that I like this," she admitted softly. "The secrecy?" I asked. "The wanting," she said, without a solution. I turned to face her. "Wanting isn't the problem," she smiled faintly. "It is when you're used to solving everything." I understood that more than she realized. Weeks passed like that. Stolen time, careful exits, desire sharpened by denial. And while the city moved on indifferent to our quiet rebellion, something inside me began to tighten. Not jealousy, not regret. Something closer to imbalance. I wasn't ashamed of us, but I was tired of pretending this version of me didn't exist 8 hours a day. The moment that made it impossible to ignore came unexpectedly. A meeting ran long. People lingered, talking in clusters. Emma stood near the window, back to the room. I gathered my things and moved to leave when I felt it. Her gaze. Strong. Unhidden. For half a second we forgot where we were. It wasn't dramatic. No one gasped. No whispers followed. But Denise glanced up. Someone else noticed the pause. The way Emma didn't look away fast enough. The room adjusted. Later that night, In the quiet of Emma's apartment, I brought it up. "We can't do this forever," I said, not accusing, just stating a fact. Emma didn't argue. That scared me more than if she had. "I know," she said finally. "I just don't know what the alternative cost yet." I reached for her hand. Neither do I. But the truth was already settling in. Love doesn't stay invisible forever. And when it starts to surface, it asks for something in return. The problem with secrets is that they change the shape of everything around them. They don't stay contained. They leak into posture, timing, tone, into the way people hesitate before speaking, into the way rooms go quiet without anyone knowing why. Emma and I hadn't been careless, but we had been human. And that, it turned out, was enough. It started with small things: a meeting rescheduled without explanation, a project reassigned with too much politeness, a question asked twice when once would have been enough. No one accused us of anything. No one needed to. The discomfort lived in the gaps, in what wasn't said, in what people began to watch more closely. Emma felt it before I did. She grew sharper at work, more distant. Not with me specifically, but with everyone. Like someone bracing for impact without knowing where it would land. At night, she was quieter. Still affectionate, still present, but preoccupied. Her mind moved ahead of her heart, mapping risks she couldn't ignore anymore. One evening, we sat across from each other at her kitchen counter, food untouched. "They're starting to notice," she said. "Notice what?" I asked, even though we both knew. "That something exists," Emma replied. "Even if they don't know what it is." I leaned back in the chair. "And what happens when they decide to name it?" Her jaw tightened. "Then it becomes a problem I'm responsible for." The words landed wrong. Not cruel, but revealing. "And what am I?" I asked quietly. Emma looked up, startled. "That's not what I meant." "I know," I said, "but that's how it sounds when you're used to being protected by the system." Silence settled between us, thick and uncomfortable. "I've worked my entire career to be taken seriously," Emma said finally. "I didn't realize how fragile that seriousness still is. I've spent mine learning how easily I can be reduced," I replied, "especially in rooms like yours. That was our first real argument. Not raised voices, not tears, just two truths colliding without cushioning. She wanted time. I wanted clarity. She wanted to manage the fallout. I wanted to know where I stood when things stopped being convenient. "You're asking me to risk everything," Emma said. "No," I replied. "I'm asking you to risk something." She looked away. The next day, the distance at work became unbearable. Emma avoided meetings she didn't need to attend. She delegated conversations that used to be hers. When we passed in the hallway, she didn't look at me. Not out of indifference, but out of fear. I recognized it. Fear of being seen choosing something she hadn't planned for. That night, I didn't go to her apartment. I walked instead. Let the city carry my thoughts without interruption. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was tired of existing in margins that benefited someone else more than me. Emma called. I didn't answer. When she finally showed up at my door the next evening, she looked undone. Not dramatic, just stripped of certainty. "I don't want to lose you," she said. No preamble, no defense. "I don't want to be hidden," I replied. She nodded slowly. "Then I have to change something." "What?" I asked. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. "I don't know yet," Emma admitted. "But I can't ask you to wait in the dark while I figure it out." That was new. Not a promise, but accountability. I stepped aside and let her in. We didn't make love that night. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, knees almost touching, hands resting close but not reaching. Intimacy doesn't always look like desire. Sometimes it looks like staying in the room when it would be easier to leave. "I don't want to be the reason you disappear," Emma said quietly. "Then don't make me," I replied. She met my eyes then, fully. No power, no defense, just a woman realizing that love, when it's real, demands a cost she can't outsource. "I'll decide," she said. "Soon," I nodded. "I know." But as she left that night, I understood something with painful clarity. Whatever Emma chose next would change both of our lives, and this time, there would be no place left to hide. Emma didn't announce her decision. She changed things. The first sign came quietly. An internal memo circulated late one afternoon, written in her unmistakably precise tone. A restructuring of reporting lines. A new oversight protocol for cross-department projects. Clear language about transparency and boundaries. No names. No explanations. Just a system adjusting itself to remove the very imbalance that had made our secrecy feel necessary. I read it twice, then a third time. By the end of the week, I was reassigned to a different division. Same level, same responsibilities, same pay. A lateral move designed not to sideline me, but to protect me. To protect us. People noticed. Of course they did. But they noticed the structure, not the rumor. The difference mattered. Emma didn't come to me that day. She didn't text. She didn't call. That restraint told me everything. We met that night at my place, not hers. She arrived without preamble, coat folded neatly over her arm, eyes steady in a way I hadn't seen before. Not guarded, resolved. I made the changes, Emma said. They're permanent. I nodded. I saw. I didn't do it for the board, she continued. Or for appearances. She paused, choosing honesty over polish. I did it because I don't want to love you in a way that takes something from you. The words settled slowly, like dust after a long movement. I'm not asking you to stay, Emma added. I'm telling you where I stand, without leverage, without hiding. If you choose this, it's because you want it, not because it's easier. I studied her face, the woman who once believed certainty could be purchased, the woman who had learned, painfully, that clarity costs more, but lasts longer. I choose you, I said. Not the version that negotiates, the one who did the work. She exhaled, the sound quiet, but full. Relief, yes, but also something deeper. Respect. We didn't rush toward each other. We crossed the space deliberately, like we understood what that movement represented now. When she kissed me, it wasn't hungry. It was sure. When we touched, it wasn't about claiming. It was about meeting. Later, lying together with the city murmuring outside my window, Emma traced a line along my shoulder and smiled. I don't know what this looks like in 6 months, she said. I do, I replied. She turned to me, curious. It looks honest, I said, and that's enough. The next morning, we walked into the world without choreography. Not hand in hand, not hiding, just aligned. At work, we were professional. At night, we were us. The line between those truths didn't blur. It clarified. Power didn't disappear from Emma's life. It just stopped standing between us. And for the first time since she spoke a sentence she thought would solve everything, love didn't ask for a price. It asked for presence, and we paid it.